Hey everyone, I am your host Peter Zablocki and you're listening to History Shorts. I hope everyone's having a great day so far and thank you for making this show a small part of that. If you'd like to help me out with a small gesture, please leave History Shorts a rating or a review and click that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. For sources and books used as the basis for these episodes, how to advertise on the show, and other information such as a list of our upcoming guests on the Conversation series, or a link to our Patreon account where you can listen to exclusive episodes not heard here, please visit www.historyshortspodcast.com. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate podcast listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the globe, all in one place. Download Podcast Republic now and take your podcast experience to the next level. Having said all of that, the American frontier was a land of promise and peril, wide, unsettled, and often lawless. In this space between civilization and wilderness, one figure became both symbol and servant of order, the circuit judge. Mounted on a horseback and armed with little more than a Bible, a law book, and an unshakable belief in justice, these roving magistrates brought the authority of the courts to some of the most remote corners of early America. Here is the rest of that story.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Circuit riding had its roots in English legal tradition, where judges traveled between shires to hear cases. The American version, however, took on a uniquely rugged quality, shaped by vast distances, unpredictable weather, and a frequently hostile environment. After independence, the fledgling United States government sought to establish a judiciary that would serve all regions of the new republic, not just the urban centers along the eastern seaboard. The Judiciary Act of 1789 established the federal court system, including a structure of circuit courts where district judges would periodically be joined by two Supreme Court justices to hold court in each circuit. In theory, this provided access to federal law throughout the nation. In practice, it was a grueling, often dangerous duty that many justices resented and few forgot. In the early 19th century, circuit judges, both federal and state, were literal riders of justice, navigating primitive roads and Indian trails, often staying in taverns or private homes, and convening court in log cabins, barns, or the back rooms of general stores. Court terms would coincide with the judge's arrival, and communities would prepare accordingly. Locals gathered in anticipation, not only to settle disputes, but to witness drama and spectacle. These judges were not just representatives of the law, they were celebrities of the saddle, bringing news from the East, interpreting statutes, and imposing justice where anarchy threatened to prevail. Nowhere was this more evident than in the Old Southwest, encompassing parts of present-day Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, and Mississippi. These were the stomping grounds of such legendary circuit riders as John McKinley of Alabama, who would later become a U.S. Supreme Court Justice, and David Campbell of Tennessee. McKinley rode hundreds of miles each year, sometimes sleeping in forests, braving swollen rivers, and holding court in makeshift courthouses hastily constructed by pioneer communities eager to impress him. Their calendars were dictated by geography and weather more than docket sizes. The physical strain of the job meant many judges, even Supreme Court justices, aged very rapidly or died in service. The most famous and perhaps most romanticized circuit judge of the American frontier was none other than Abraham Lincoln, though he was never a judge himself. As a lawyer in Illinois, Lincoln rode the circuit with Judge David Davis, who presided over the 8th Judicial Circuit of Illinois. From March to November, Davis and a band of lawyers, including Lincoln, traveled together across a vast stretch of central Illinois, trying civil and criminal cases in county seats. The men shared rooms, meals, and long conversations. Judge Davis, later a Supreme Court justice himself, was known for his sharp intellect and immense physical stature, while Lincoln's homespun wit and skill at cross-examination earned him a reputation as one of the finest legal minds in the West. Lincoln's experiences riding the circuit deeply shaped his understanding of the law, justice, and human nature. He saw firsthand the rough realities of frontier life, the feuds, theft, land disputes, and violence, and learned how to appeal to both juries and judges with logic and empathy. In these courtrooms, there was no grandeur of marble halls. Instead, there were creaky benches, dirt floors, and citizens desperate for resolution. His law partner, William Herndon, later recalled that Lincoln was as familiar in court as he was in a cornfield, and as sincere in argument as he was in conversation. The personal connections forged on the circuit helped Lincoln build the political relationships that would later carry him to the presidency. But the life of a circuit judge was not for the faint-hearted. Many frontier judges found themselves navigating not just physical danger, but also deep moral and political complexity. In territories like Missouri and Arkansas, circuit judges often presided over cases involving slavery, land fraud, and Native American removal. In the absence of higher legal authority, their rulings could shape the fate of entire communities. Some judges, like Judge Benjamin Harrison of Indiana, the grandfather of President Benjamin Harrison, developed reputations as reformers and moral guides, cracking down on vigilante justice and pushing for legal order even when it put them at odds with local power brokers. The threat of violence was constant. Circuit judges were known to carry pistols or knives while traveling. In Texas, where lawlessness was especially rampant during and after the Republic era, judges often dealt with rustlers, murderers, and political radicals. Judge Roy Bean, for instance, was a saloon keeper and self-proclaimed judge in Langtree, Texas. Though not a circuit judge in the traditional legal sense, his authority was often more legendary than legitimate. Bean embodied the rough justice of the frontier. He held court in his saloon, fined culprits in whiskey, and famously declared, "Hang him first, try him later." While Bean is more myth than model, his story reveals how deeply the frontier yearned for some form of justice, even if improvised. Yet not all justice on the frontier was so flamboyant. Many circuit judges took their duties seriously and understood the power they wielded. They enforced contracts, certified deeds, resolved disputes over livestock and land, and presided over criminal trials ranging from petty theft to murder. Juries were selected from the local population, neighbors judging neighbors, and verdicts often reflected community values more than strict adherence to stature. In this way, circuit courts were a powerful reflection of American democracy at work, decentralized, adaptive, and responsive to the needs of ordinary people. The American West brought new challenges. As settlers pushed into the Rockies, judges followed. In places like Colorado, Montana, and California during the gold rush, circuit courts were essential to managing boomtown chaos. With populations swelling overnight and gold fever driving desperate acts, circuit judges brought a stabilizing presence. Judge Lorenzo Sawyer, who rode circuit in 1850s California, later wrote of how court was held in canvas tents, old cabins, hotels, warehouses, and even barrooms. The trials were often interrupted by saloon brawls, but the principle of law endured. Sawyer later ascended to the U.S. Ninth Circuit and became a pioneer of federal jurisprudence in the West. With the Civil War and Reconstruction, the circuit system was further tested. In the South, federal circuit judges were tasked with enforcing Reconstruction laws and constitutional amendments. often in deeply hostile territory. These judges were sometimes guarded by federal troops and faced assassination threats from white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan. Yet their work was instrumental in securing legal protections for newly freed Black Americans, at least temporarily. Figures like Judge Hugh Lennox Bond of Maryland and Judge William Woods of Alabama presided over high-stakes cases involving civil rights, voting rights, and the violent resistance to Reconstruction. Their rulings and bravery reinforced the idea that justice, even in embattled regions, could be enforced by law and not by mob rule. By the late 19th century, the nature of circuit riding began to change. Railroads made travel more efficient, reducing the need for judges to spend weeks on horseback. The creation of additional federal courts and structures under the Judiciary Act of 1891 helped shift the burden away from the Supreme Court justices, who had long complained at the requirements of circuit duty. This act established the U.S. Courts of Appeals and created permanent judges, thereby professionalizing and stabilizing the system. Still, the spirit of the circular judge traveling on horseback endured. In the 20th century, some states and territories continued to rely on circuit systems, especially in rural areas where centralized courthouses were very rare. Even today, in parts of Alaska and remote regions of the American West, magistrates and judges must sometimes travel by plane, snowmobile, or boat to reach isolated communities. While the tools have changed, the mission remains the same: to deliver justice to all corners of the land, regardless of geography or hardship. Thanks for listening. This week on the Conversation Series, Brenda Wineapple discusses her newest book called Keepin' the Faith, about the famous Scopes trial.
W.E.B. Du Bois wrote about the trial, his magazine, The Crisis, and he said, the truth is, and we know it, that Dayton, Tennessee is America. And I thought, well, whoa, what do you mean by that? And I think that is a way to get to this issue of how Brian and Darrow had competing visions of democracy, because when you're talking about America, you're talking about democracy, really, in this particular sense. And I thought Du Bois is picking up on something that gets lost to us over time. And I was curious as to what that was.